So the Melbourne Metro tunnel has been open to the public for just over a month now, and despite still running to a very sparse temporary timetable, it appears to be getting a pretty good reception. As you probably noticed, I've made quite a lot of videos about the Metro tunnel, and so far I've been pretty complimentary about it. I am a big supporter of this project overall, and I'm pretty impressed with how it's all turned out. Over December, I had a chance to properly poke around all the new stations, and during this time I have collected a lot of thoughts, observations, and criticisms that I'd like to share with you. So in this video, we're going to take a look at all 5 Metro tunnel stations, and I'm going to point out some things I think are good, some things I think are bad, some things I think are interesting, and I guess just quite a few things I personally would have liked to see done differently. Just a quick reminder, I'm making this video in the first week of 2026, and we're in what's called the summer start. It's basically a soft launch of services through the tunnel, running only every 20 minutes and only during off-peak times, and the rest of the network is still operating as normal. The new timetable with full service through the tunnel, what they're calling the big switch, is due to kick in on the 1st of Feb 2026, and we still know hardly anything about it, especially details on what timetable changes may or may not happen on other lines. So in this video, I'm not going to be doing commentary on the service levels or other operational details because we just don't have enough information yet. Instead, I'm going to focus on the stuff we can see: design elements of the stations, wayfinding, basic functionality, and whatever other random facts I feel like throwing in along the way. We're going to start at the southern end of the tunnel at Anzac station, then work our way up towards Arden from there. Alright, let's do this. We're starting our day on a tram, and that's because the first thing we're going to look at is the interchange from trams to trains at Anzac station. The connection here really is excellent, probably the best on the system, with a direct pedestrian route from the tram island platform at ground level to the railway island platform underground. And it is currently the only place in Melbourne where a tram stop is integrated into the actual design of a railway station, and where you can transfer between a train and a tram without having to walk across a single road or bike lane. However, I've noticed some interesting variations of these facts in a lot of official project and government media. So as I step off the tram and make the connection to the Metro tunnel, let's have a look at some of those claims. The Metro tunnel socials describes it with the phrase, "our first tram train interchange." Government website Victoria's Big Build describes it as Melbourne's first direct tram train interchange. And MP for Sunbury, Josh Bull, goes one step further, calling it Melbourne's first ever direct tram train interchange. So, are any of these correct? Well, no, but some of them are wronger than others. Without the distinctions I added in my definition about crossing traffic lanes and integration with station design, there are loads of other places around Melbourne that are tram train interchanges, and some you could maybe even describe as direct tram train interchanges. So it's kind of a meaningless distinction without those caveats. The other part of these posts is that they all say first or first ever, and that's not true. St Kilda and Sandringham both had railway-operated tram lines departing from immediately outside their station buildings, with no road crossings, up until the 1950s. I've saved the best one for last though. Our new favourite centralised transport agency, Transport Victoria, posted that this is none other than Australia's first tram and train interchange. Well, not even close. There's a long list of historic ones and several very notable current examples. Sydney Central might be the most obvious one, where trams run through the entrance to the station concourse. Then there's Newcastle Interchange, very much an integrated direct connection, and there's Helensvale on the Gold Coast, with a direct pedestrian route between 2 island platforms, just like Anzac. That took 65 seconds, by the way. Not bad, though I did just miss the train, which would make it a 21-minute connection on the current timetable. The other, and I think much cooler distinguishing fact about Anzac is that it's the southernmost underground railway station in the world. I mentioned this in a video once before when I wasn't actually 100% sure if I was right, but I am now 100% sure it's correct, and I'd like to give a special shout out to the numerous people who told me I was wrong because there are underground stations in Auckland. Auckland is not south of Melbourne, guys. It's roughly level with central Victoria. A few other people also quoted another Kiwi station, the former Hamilton Central, which, yeah, it would have been very close if it still existed, but it was also about 5 kilometres further north than Anzac. Okay, I'm done correcting people, let's actually look at the station. Aesthetically, I love the canopy. I think it's one of the more interesting visual features on the line. Functionally, however, it doesn't actually provide much shelter. There's a kind of modern obsession with shelters being really high up and only covering part of the platform, which misses the sort of sheltering part. This is compounded by the fact that southbound trams stop all the way down there. So there's actually a pretty long unsheltered walk when interchanging. If you want to see how to actually shelter a platform, please see somewhere like Hawthorne. They really knew how to do this in the 19th century. Down under the canopy, I really have no complaints. This might be my favourite spot at any of the stations. It's really well filled with natural light. The green columns and exposed timber are a refreshing change from the concrete and grey walls that dominate a lot of the other spaces, and I do like how you can clearly hear the trams up above. Something that's changed since my earlier visits to the tunnel are these signs. The parts which previously said "way out" in very small text have been replaced by these exit numbers, and the bottom part has been replaced to show the general direction of trams, suggesting the best exit for trams to the city and trams to the suburbs. I really like generalised directions like this, but I hate how small they are. I don't think the numbered exits are something that will catch on easily in public language, and I'd much prefer to see the prominence of these reversed. The tram directions are far more important to see at a glance than exit numbers. As well as the big central entrance, Anzac has a pedestrian subway with additional entrances either side of St Kilda Road, and they have some very cool circular lift shafts. When I got into the lift at the western end, I was a bit surprised to see two separate street levels. Turns out there's one for the little reserve towards Albert Road, then there's a little half level up to an exit on St Kilda Road on the eastern side. There's also a separate goods lift here, and I think it's cool how they went with a more basic square design to help differentiate it from the passenger lift. And also the clear and accurate labelling using the word goods, which has sort of been out of favour on the railways for many years, being replaced by the more American term freight. Just to be clear for anyone wondering, there's no goods travelling by train here, the goods lift is just to get supplies to the shops down on the concourse. There's a whole bunch of unsheltered and unsecured bike racks here, currently empty. I feel like there won't be a large demand for bike parking this close to the city. If you're this close already, you'll probably just ride the whole way, but maybe I'll be proven wrong, we shall see. Heading back in, we're going down the escalator, and both the smaller entrances at Anzac have this steel structure painted Anzac green, which again I think looks really good and distinctive. The underpass at this end features a long mural on both sides called Future Wall Painting by Rafat Ishaq. Though it's easy to be distracted by the fact it's cut in half by this massive and very bright advertising screen. You don't see this in any of the official photos, it does appear in some of the renders, but always has strategically placed people blocking the view. I know I laid into this a bit in the opening day video, but I am genuinely shocked about how prominent the advertising screens are at all the Metro tunnel stations. Like, they're really the first thing that catches your attention at most of the entrances, well before you see anything like train information. I'm well aware these things bring in a lot of money, but making money is not the purpose of this place. I do have more thoughts on this, but we're going to be seeing a lot more advertising as we work through the stations, so we'll come back to it. Near the centre of the concourse is a 7-Eleven with a special custom artwork showing a 7-Eleven livery extrapolis. That's actually kind of cool. At the eastern end of the concourse there are, guess what, more very bright advertising screens. They do occasionally show transport related messaging as part of their cycle, but it's mostly ads. At the far end there's the other circular lift, and what I think might be one of my favourite artworks in the tunnel, Plants for Remembrance by Fiona Hall. This station is located a short distance from the Shrine of Remembrance, and the name Anzac refers to the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps. Apparently Anzac should be written capitalised when referring to the Corps itself, but lowercase, as used in the station name, is the accepted practice for the word's more general use relating to the armed forces. The plants depicted here are ones with symbolic connections to Australia's military service, and I think the low-key colours of this artwork fit the surroundings really well. Either side of the lift are a couple more artworks, also by Fiona Hall, depicting some carrier pigeons, and they're actually representations of two specific carrier pigeons. I think this is pretty cool, so I'm actually going to read out the captions on the plaques here. DD-43Q879 was a Victorian-bred carrier pigeon who served with the Australian Army Signal Corps and Allied American forces on Manus Island during the Second World War. On 5th of April 1944, during a Japanese attack on a US Marine Corps patrol, DD-43Q879 was one of 3 pigeons released under heavy fire to carry a message back to base warning of an imminent enemy counterattack. The first 2 pigeons were shot down immediately. DD-43Q879 was released in a final attempt to successfully get the message through and, despite also coming under fire, managed to fly more than 40 kilometres to base in 47 minutes. Upon receiving the information, the Allied forces were able to mount a successful defence against the Japanese military attack. DD-43Q879 was awarded the Dickin Medal, which is the Victoria Cross equivalent for animals, given in recognition of outstanding duty. Then over here we have DD-43T139, who was a Victorian-bred carrier pigeon who served in New Guinea with the Australian Army Signal Corps during the Second World War. On 12th of July 1945, he flew during a severe tropical storm with a message from a foundering army boat to Madang, taking 50 minutes to fly the 64-kilometre distance. The hastily written message read, "Engine failed. Wash onto beach at Wadu owing very heavy seas. Send help immediately. Am rapidly filling with sand." Successful delivery of the information enabled the boat and its valuable cargo of equipment and ammunition to be salvaged. DD-43T-139 had previously flown 23 operational missions, covering a distance totaling 1,615 kilometres. He was awarded the Dickin Medal, which is the Victoria Cross equivalent for animals given in recognition of outstanding duty. These are honestly the best pigeon-related stories I've ever seen at any Victorian railway station. Really cool. Quick side note, I couldn't find any information on how the naming of these pigeons work. I'm assuming the 43 is either the year of hatching or year of enlistment, and the last part is probably just a unique number. If anyone knows what the letters mean, please do let us know. The lift at this end also has 3 levels, but one of them is just a top secret basement. The screen inside displays a custom slideshow, but of the wrong station. That's Arden. This is made slightly funnier by the fact that there aren't any lifts at Arden with screens like this. I checked, so it really does seem like this was made specifically for this lift using the wrong pictures. The top of this lift is a standalone structure on the edge of the park, and I think I'm putting this on my top 5 Melbourne lift entrances list for cool design. Just near this entrance on Domain Road is another tram stop, currently only served by buses. Trams were temporarily diverted away from this line several years ago to allow for the construction of Anzac, and while the track connection was reinstated and this new stop built, there's still no clear plan to return trams to this road, and it's still disconnected at the other end of the diversion. It's actually starting to get a bit weird now, with how much effort has gone into retaining the connection and stop at this end. For now, it's a mystery. Heading back down the stairs, you can see this entrance is very similar to the one at the other end, with the green steel structure overhead. As we get back down to concourse level, we get blinded by the advertising again. It's actually hard to articulate just how bright these screens are. You can see it's overexposing a little on camera, but they really do seem a lot brighter than I'd normally expect for something like this. For the actually useful screens, the ones with the train information, you have to walk all the way to the barriers, and the small text on small screens means you have to walk right up to them. When I'm walking into a railway station, the number one thing I actually want to see is minutes to departure, to see how quickly I need to walk the remaining distance to the platform. And that's the smallest thing on these displays. Honestly, I'd prefer to see something like this. The platform number isn't super critical at this point, as the route to both platforms is the same, and I can work out which side I need to be on once I get down there, thanks to these signs, which, as I mentioned in my last video, I am very grateful have now been included, as there was no clear signage here initially. Down on the platform, we spot the first examples of a series of artworks that appear across all 5 stations, called tracks. Get it? By First Nations artist Marie Clark. The tracks are mosaics of coloured granite assembled by hand and depict footprints of native animals found across the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation, encompassing Melbourne and a large part of central Victoria. This particular footprint at Anzac is that of a southern bent-wing bat, and there are 7 different footprints at each of the 5 stations, making for 35 different feet all up. It took me far too long to identify these. There's no list of them on any of the official web pages or pamphlets about the artwork. The stations do have small signs listing them, but they're kind of hard to find. Given there doesn't appear to be any complete reference for these online, I decided to make my own PDF guide, which you're welcome to download or print if you want to go footprint hunting. Link down below. So the Metro Tunnel stations are designed to accommodate 10-car trains, but at the moment all the trains are 7 cars. So they stop at the far end of each platform, leaving a large section at each end that currently does nothing in particular. And what's kind of odd is that those end sections are already fitted out with platform screen doors. The only indication that these doors aren't in use is this stickering to tell you to move further down the platform, but I don't think this is nearly obvious enough, and it could just be interpreted as indicating the direction trains are travelling. I did spot this one example at State Library displaying a red light over the door, but it's the only one I saw like that. Some of the out-of-use doors also have functioning PIDs over the top of them, which really makes them look in use. By contrast, some of the doors that are in use don't have PIDs, and I can absolutely see people standing by these doors waiting to board if they're not 100% paying attention. It seems like this actually has been a problem already, as I've noticed staff making a lot of announcements reminding people that not all doors are in use. Not exactly a sustainable way of managing this situation. It's kind of weird that the setup here looks like they're preparing to start 10-car operation any day now. But to be clear, this is not happening anytime soon. The additional cars required to extend the trains have not been ordered, and none of the other platforms on the route outside the tunnel have been extended yet, so I'd expect this to be something that's at least a decade away, maybe more. I really think they should have made these not look like doors at all, maybe even sticker this bit to look like a wall to completely avoid confusion. In one of my previous videos, I pointed out that at least some of the trains were not fully level with the platform height, and I had a few people saying I was being silly for focusing on such a small detail when it looks pretty close to level. To To be absolutely clear, I'm well aware that this is a tiny height difference compared to most other stations on the network, but these are brand new stations with custom designed trains, so they should be very close to dead level. By my understanding, the legal specification for unassisted level boarding is a height variance of no more than 12mm. I know it's really hard to judge this sort of thing by eye on camera, but have a look at this. This is car 9914, and let's check the first door. Bit of a bump, not too bad. Second door, bit more of a bump. You can see the top of these holes in the rubber gap filler. The middle of those holes is about 50mm from the top, so we're looking at roughly a 40 to 45mm height difference there from the platform. Spec is 12mm, remember. Then the third door, this one's actually pretty good, which illustrates something very interesting, which is a definite height difference between different doors on the same car. I checked this across quite a few different examples, and a lot of them have the middle door noticeably higher than the two end doors, which suggests one thing, and that's a very slightly banana-shaped frame. Banana-shaped passenger cars were very common back when passenger cars were made of wood, so it's great to see a continuation of this Victorian Railways tradition. Each platform screen door has markings in the tiles showing where the doorway is and an arrow showing where passengers will walk out. The purpose of this type of marking is to encourage boarding passengers to wait either side of the doorway, not in the middle. But they've kind of missed part 2 of this, which is the arrows on the sides. Most systems around the world which have platform screen doors have some version of this, and they're almost always high visibility with arrows showing the positions for both directions. Here's an example in Hong Kong. In fact, the position of the doors in general is very low visibility. They don't immediately jump out from the rest of the glass wall. I think I would have made these columns yellow, or possibly the doors themselves. We're just about ready to head to the next station, but here's a dingo footprint and an anti-kindness. Right, let's go. Incidentally, this train is HCMT set number 2, the exact same one that ran the first train into the tunnel on opening day, and this was actually the second time since opening I'd coincidentally got set 2 in the tunnel. Given there are 70 of these trains, that's quite a coincidence, so I assume it's been rostered on these shuttles the whole time. Right, here we are at Town Hall, and first things first, apparently this is what a platypus footprint looks like. Something we noticed here was a new type of platform sign which appears to be replacing the older ones installed at the stations. This one has a matte finish. Compare that to this example of the original type at Arden, which is reflective and quite hard to see from some angles. And it's also had the treatment of the exit numbers replacing the very small way out text. Similar to earlier, I'd prefer to see the actual destinations of these exits given more prominence over the fairly meaningless numbers, but overall the design is better and the matte finish is way more user-friendly. Wombat. At the southern end of the platform is really the only place that still looks incomplete on any of the platforms, that being the stairs towards the Federation Square exit, which currently looks like this at ground level and will apparently be completed later in 2026. This footprint had me genuinely stumped. Can you guess what it is? It's a black swan. I know I touched on this in the opening day video, but I do find it quite annoying that there is no train information at all in this central hall area. You have to duck into the alcoves along the platforms to see the PIDs, and even then they're spaced quite far apart. If only they could have found space for some sort of large screen displaying relevant information in here, maybe hanging from the ceiling? Anyway, just an idea. Apart from the lack of information, I do really like this, hold on, another footprint. This one is a thylacine, Tasmanian tiger. A lot of people probably aren't aware of this, but thylacines did exist on the mainland historically, before ultimately existing only in Tasmania, and then, of course, nowhere. And over here we have a Ricali, the native water rat. Alright, let's go upstairs and check out ground level. The massive advertising screen in the crypt is now more complete than on my last visit and was actually turned on displaying black, causing this annoying flicker on camera. Something a few people have pointed out is that the signage for the escalators here is static, even though the escalators are usually down on one side and up on the other, so half of these signs will always be wrong. Cool. This is an especially odd choice given Melbourne Central just received these new variable signs showing escalator direction. Over the Collins Street entrance is this high louvered roof, which can apparently adjust according to the weather, and it'll be interesting to see how well that works. This wall straight ahead kind of looks like a frame rate error on camera, but it's not, it's an artwork and it actually looks like that. Directly above the crypt is the newly rebuilt City Square. I've seen a lot of opinions on this, one way or the other, but to be honest, I don't have any strong feelings about it. It's a bit grey and there's not much shade in the middle of the day, but I think it's alright. At the time of my visit, there was this Christmas throne, but you had to provide your own Santa. The thing I really do like about this spot is the choice of planting, with native Victorian species including these wonderful grass trees, one of few plants I can remember the scientific name for, Xanthorrhea. Most grass trees are very well adapted to surviving bushfires to the extent that they actually like being on fire. It encourages them to flower. You can see all these ones have blackened trunks, and assuming they're not from the wild, I'd say it's very likely they were set on fire intentionally by whoever grew them. Another cool thing about these, and it's a little hard to see here, but the flower stems have a lot more flowers on the north side where they get more sun. That's the south side there, and that's the north, with a much more even flower covering. Back down in the crypt, I noticed something interesting. In earlier videos, I stated that these orange ceiling beams only exist within the paid areas of the station, but we're outside the paid area here and there's a small patch of orange beams. Not sure if there are any others like this. Heading back down the escalators, I was hit by a sudden impulse to change my energy provider. Did you know AGL has been trusted by Australians for over 185 years? Also, I really need to do some shopping on the way home. I haven't had enough rewards today. And did you know there's a festive cashback and exclusive perks in the NAB app? Armed with those facts, it was back down to platform level and then up the other end to check out the Flinders Street End concourse, where I squinted at this tiny PID to see the next train heading north was still 15 minutes away. If only there was a bigger screen around here somewhere. Heading back down, I was briefly able to check the weather and consider how 22 degrees was the perfect temperature for signing up to AGL. In the platform alcoves, it's quite nice how the concrete ceiling is illuminated with orange light. It actually would have been great to see this on more of the plain concrete surfaces around the station. This one's a frog. It doesn't say what type. Alright, next station.
State Library.
On arrival at State Library, I quickly found an echidna footprint, and one I actually recognised, a kangaroo. I quite like these main central caverns at State Library and Town Hall. I like the lights, I like the orange arches. But I do have a major objection, and I think most of you know what it is. These two stations are basically identical at platform level. I think it was such a missed opportunity not to have any real visual distinction, and I think it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how people navigate their everyday surroundings. These stations are designed so that your primary or even only way of knowing where you are is by reading signs and listening to announcements. But that should never be the main way you identify a major city location like this. The displays and announcements on the trains are not really reliable enough to rely on entirely, and if you're expecting passengers to identify stations by the platform signs, well, you'd better hope they're standing in the right doorway. Here's the view from one doorway at Anzac, and there's one sign over there, which not everybody would be able to read, and the only other one in my field of vision is over there. While the two CBD stations are virtually identical at platform level, the same goes for the three minor stations. Which one is this? One of the beautiful things about using public transport compared to driving is that you don't have to pay attention to what's going on 100% of the time. It's okay to daydream out the window while listening to music or a podcast or mentally ranking railway lines, and the way you normally know when to get off is when the place you're going to appears in your field of view. No reading or listening out required. The three underground stations in the city loop are all really visually distinct. It's effortless to tell the difference between them without paying attention to any signs or announcements, and that was a deliberate design choice. It seems like there was some move towards having a distinct colour for each metro tunnel station. We've already seen the green at Anzac, but that's the only station where it appears extensively. Parkville has a blue version, but it only appears on the minor secondary entrances. State Library has this lovely red colour on the Franklin Street entrance, and usefully this services building, but nowhere else. Town Hall's Fed Square entrance is going to be purple, but I haven't seen purple anywhere else. And Arden... Actually, I don't think Arden has a colour at all. Town Hall should absolutely have been yellow, by the way. It would have fitted in with the surroundings so much better. So it seems an attempt was made with colour coding, but that distinction didn't carry down to where it would have been most useful at platform level. A friend of mine actually had a casual discussion about this with a staff member who commented that at least the stations are visually distinct when you're driving past. And I don't even know where to start with that one, but it does seem like that was the attitude of the design process here, thinking about the stations as something you would go past at ground level rather than arrive at underground. I really wish they'd run with the distinct colours and used them instead of the orange at platform level. And it would have been really easy to extend that colour coding to other features. You could run a strip of coloured LEDs along that part of the tunnel wall, for instance. I'm someone with a pretty good sense of direction who knows Melbourne and in fact this tunnel really well. But I've already had moments at these stations where I can't immediately recall which station I'm currently at. or have had to think about which station contains a certain feature because I can't match it with anything visual in my mind. In this shot, I only know I'm at Town Hall because of the order I shot the footage in. Except that was a lie and this is State Library, but could you tell? The fact remains, I'm foreseeing a future nightmare of trying to identify the locations of pictures and video that contain no identifying features. Honestly, everyone's going to need to learn to identify those footprints if they want any chance of knowing where they are. This one's an emu, by the way. Okay, I'm done complaining about that. Let's get out of State Library and head up to the Swanston Street entrance. Actually, wait, no, this is Town Hall again. This is State Library heading up to the Swanston Street entrance. Right, so we're up on Swanston Street, busiest tram corridor in the world, and recognise this guy? That's D1 3520, the same tram we saw arriving at Anzac earlier in the day. I quite like coming down this entrance, it feels quite grand, and it's also a much better way of getting into Melbourne Central than the traditional entrance across the road. Danny Mellor's artwork looks great with the backlighting, although I was quickly distracted from that by an overwhelming urge to receive festive cashbacks and exclusive perks. These things are so bright. Oh yeah, just in case anyone's watching this video in the future and thinks I'm fair evading, I filmed this on a Sunday in December when it was free weekend travel in the lead up to the full Metro tunnel opening. Back down on the platforms, I noticed this new water feature, which, to be fair, I don't think Town Hall has one of these. That could be another distinctive characteristic. And I made an updated recording of the talking brick. Something I've noticed in all the information since my earlier visits is that these trains were originally described as being via Town Hall.
Via Town Hall.
But have since been changed to via the Metro tunnel.
Via the Metro tunnel.
I can sort of see why they do this right now, but I hope they change it back to via Town Hall long term. I think that's better. Okay, goodbye State Library. Hello Parkville.
Hello and welcome to Parkville Station. We're having a lovely Sunday. We have 3 escalators leading up to the concourse.
Just quickly, this is car 9825. First door, pretty good. Middle door, getting close to the 50mm mark. Third door, pretty good. Sugar glider. So a cool thing about Parkville is that despite being quite a deep station, in the middle of the day in summer, some sunlight does reach the platform. This is really nice. It's hard to emphasize how nice this is actually. Because it will only happen at certain times, it'll be a nice little surprise for people to spot, and even just this small patch of natural light really lifts the feeling of the station for me, giving a very tangible connection to the above ground world. Riding up the escalators, it's a genuinely beautiful moment that draws your eye up to the lofty station canopy. Great time to sign up to AGL, by the way, and it gives you a real impression of how deep you are below street level here. The concourse has become mostly populated with shops since my last visit, and yeah, I know I'm not the first person to say this, but it's a very underwhelming selection of mostly multinational-owned fast food options, particularly ironic given this is a hospital district. Given this is Melbourne, I'd really like to see a proper cafe here. There is going to be an IGA at least, so that's something useful. In addition to the main entrance, there are 3 smaller entrances at the eastern end, giving grade-separated access under Royal Parade to the hospitals, and partially grade-separated access to Tram Route 19. You still have to cross a couple of lanes of traffic to get to the stops. This is the view coming up the main Royal Parade exit, and you can see it's the same design as the smaller Anzac entrances, just with Parkville blue instead of green. And as I alluded to before, the blue only appears on the minor entrances and not the main one. On the south side of the entrance is a cool fern garden and an old piece of Melbourne Uni fencing. All the entrances here have a separate set of lifts. So this is Arden Street, that's the main entrance down there. Then there's the Royal Parade entrance, and the hospital entrances there, and there. These box things along Grattan Street are the station's skylights, and it's a bit awkward, but you can see down through them to the concourse. They're kind of a good height for sitting on, but if you're going to do that, just consider that you can see through them in the other direction too. I really like this main entrance structure. It reminds me of a big glass house or conservatory, and this is where the light was coming from we could see down on the platform. I do think it's weird and inconsistent that the steel structure inside this is grey and not blue like the other entrances. I also wish they'd leaned more heavily into the whole conservatory thing and filled it with plants. Like, seriously, how incredibly cool would this look with a bunch of hanging ferns in it? Grattan Street doesn't have much road traffic, and it was fully closed for several years during the construction phase. I think they should have kept it that way and made it pedestrianised, or at the very least, bus only. The descent down from the main entrance is very cool, and looks particularly good at this time of day with all the sun shining in. Patricia Piccinini's massive ceramic mural dominates the north wall, and it's a nice contrast to some of the other station entrances being welcomed by art rather than advertising. The 7-Eleven here has another custom artwork showing animals going to the zoo, which is about 1.6 kilometres from here, although this is not the station you'd use to get there. This koala has clearly been forced to buy a 7-Eleven coffee due to the lack of other options. Realising the next train was now, and not wanting to spend another 20 minutes here, I barely had time to contemplate Woolworth's everyday rewards or analyse train platform interface discrepancies before jumping on a train to the final tunnel station of Arden, which was the only Metro tunnel station I didn't manage to visit before it opened. That was a big one, by the way, middle door of 9369. Hopping mouse. As mentioned earlier, Arden still has the shiny way out signs, and it'll be interesting to see if these get replaced soon. Qual. So the thing that's very cool about Arden is that it's by far the shallowest of the 5 stations. There are several large skylights up above the concourse, and this leads to a lot of sunlight making it down to platform level. Certainly a lot more than that small patch at Parkville, and it would also be reaching down here for a much longer part of the day. It's really nice, and something I wasn't expecting to see anywhere in the tunnel. The sunlight, when it's here, is also a good identifying feature because, once again, if you're trying to work out this location from the signs, there's one there I can almost read, and then there? The stations were named by public competition back in, I think, 2017, and the name chosen from that competition for this station was actually North Melbourne, taking that name from the existing North Melbourne, which would have been renamed West Melbourne in the process. This would have correctly aligned the 2 station names with the suburbs they are located in, but lots of people, including the emergency services, quickly pointed out that reusing a well-known station name in a slightly different location was actually a terrible idea. So they reverted to the working title for this station of Arden, named after the nearby, although not immediately adjacent, Arden Street. I quite like the name Arden, and it does follow the age-old Victorian Railways tradition of naming a station after a nearby street, then removing the street part. Westgarth, Bell, and Burnley are all examples of this. However, this choice of name does create a situation that I'm not a huge fan of, and I'm aware this is not the biggest problem in the world, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it was a bad decision to have 2 of the stations being 5-letter words starting with A. It makes them harder to differentiate from a distance, especially for anyone with poor vision, and it's very easy to mistake them when reading. I've already had a couple of situations where I quickly read a sentence about one of these stations and my mental autocomplete interpreted it as the wrong one. It wouldn't surprise me at all if this is the reason for the wrong slideshow showing at Anzac. Also, if I'm travelling in a country where I don't speak the language, I'll generally know the approximate length and first letter of wherever I'm trying to go without necessarily being able to remember how it's actually spelt. So having 2 very similar stations on the same route either side of the CBD which have very similarly formed names has a lot of potential for confusion. I don't think this is a huge problem, but there were multiple choices for both station names. Some other options for Anzac were Shrine or the historic name for that location, Domain. So it would have been pretty easy to choose one of those and avoid the clash. Arden is the only one of the 5 stations to have just a single entrance, but it makes up for it in being one of the most dramatic ones, with these quite amazing brick arches curving over the top of the concourse and escalators. The interesting thing about this station right now is that there actually isn't much here. There is a major urban development planned for this area, so it will be a very busy place one day, but right now the station building sticks out of a fairly barren landscape, and the skylights along the station concourse are just in the middle of a field. The west side of the station building is quite plain. I'm guessing that in the long term it won't be very visible amongst the other stuff that will be built here. But the eastern side features a massive and quite striking artwork by Abdul Abdallah. The background is a mosaic recreating a painting by J.S. Calder from 1860. View from Royal Park across West Melbourne's swamp, overlaid with a large pair of aluminium hands. If we look closely at the original painting, it shows a Williamstown line train crossing over water on a long causeway, approximately where the Moonee Ponds Creek Bridge is today. I never knew it looked like that. The modern day site of Arden would be somewhere in the mid-foreground of the image. You can't really make out that specific detail in the mosaic representation, but I still really like this. Even though the area around the station feels very bare at the moment, there have been a lot of trees planted, and we can get some idea of what this will feel like with this view from Lawrence Street, which already has mature trees. Exiting the station, there's a sign pointing to buses 90 metres away, but as far as I can tell, this is not currently true. The bus stop on Lawrence Street is not in use, and I can't see anything else within that distance. The Big Build website says new bus on Lawrence Street, but nothing else. The archway through the building is on about an 18-degree angle relative to the square part. This is because the archway is aligned with the platforms below, while the rest of the building is aligned with the street grid. Heading back underground, it's worth taking a moment to sit back and fully appreciate the soundscape of this escalator. Just near the base of the escalators is this very interesting historic artifact. It's a sandstone plaque reading G&MR 1857. This is a relic of the Geelong and Melbourne Railway Company, who built the line between Newport and Geelong in the 1850s. This plaque was mounted on the station building at Werribee when the line opened in 1857, but was removed when that building was severely damaged by a fire in 1927. The G&MR didn't exist by that point. They only ran trains for 3 years before being bought out by the Victorian Railways in 1860. Same year that painting was done. But after the fire, the plaque was moved to a railway building at the Victorian Railway's Arden Street sidings, which once occupied the space where Arden Station now stands. It remained attached to that building, visible from Lawrence Street, right up until mid-2017. There it is, when the building was demolished to make way for the station construction. Fortunately, the plaque was safely stored and installed where we see it now, in its third railway location in its 169-year history. So while the G&MR had no historic connection to this location, the plaque itself certainly does, having been in the Arden area for almost a century. Just quickly, I made a video about the G&MR a while back. It's almost entirely animated and I had a lot of fun with it. It's also what I drew that banana graphic for originally. Please go watch it if you haven't already. Thanks. Information. Summer delivered in under 2 hours. While the summer start timetable obviously gives the tunnel pretty limited usefulness for the time being, it was nice to see a lot of people at most of the stations, particularly as we got towards afternoon. The vast majority of people appeared to be doing exactly what I was doing, wandering around just looking at the stations, and it was a really varied demographic spread across all ages. In a previous video, I said I thought the summer start was a perfectly reasonable way to transition the tunnel into full operation, but now I've actually experienced it firsthand, I'm not quite so sure about that. The reason for the limited operating hours and very low frequency hasn't been communicated well, and I think a lot of people are taking what they see at face value and wondering why they have to wait 19 minutes for a train at their brand new city station, or wondering why they can't get a train at all at 8 AM in the morning. I don't necessarily have an answer for how to do a transition better, if a transition period was even needed at all, but I don't think this was a great way to do it. It's really not showing the public what this tunnel can actually do. I'm recording this voiceover with just 1 month to go until the big switch, and as I mentioned earlier, we still don't really know what we can expect from the full timetable. I don't think there's many transport agencies in the world who would be keeping such a significant change secret just 4 weeks before it goes live. One last little observation before we leave Arden. As you probably all know by now, these doors on the platform are called platform screen doors, usually abbreviated as PSDs. I heard one announcement telling people to keep clear of the PSD doors. The D already stands for door, and I heard 2 other announcements calling them passenger screen doors. Terminological inaccuracies aside, I actually don't think any of this terminology should be used in announcements. Platform screen door is an internal technical term. You can just call them doors. People will know what you mean when you say stand clear of the doors. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this slightly deeper dive into the Metro tunnel as it stands at the beginning of 2026. For the things I've been critical of in this video, I tried to stick to relatively minor issues that could be fixed or improved if the will exists to do so. In the scheme of such a massive project, it wouldn't be that hard or expensive to extend station color coding, make sure a platform sign can be seen from every doorway, or turn down the brightness on the advertising screens, though my even more radical suggestion would be repurposing the larger ones for video art. Hopefully in my next Metro Tunnel video, we'll be able to look at the Big Switch timetable and see what kind of service we're actually getting out of all this. And thank you very much for watching.